I don't age. I level up.
For 2 decades, the internet told us Chuck Norris could not die. Death once had a near Chuck Norris experience. We laughed because we believed it. The man who roundhouse kicked his way into immortality was supposed to outlive time itself. But on March 19, 2026, the world received the news it never prepared for. Carlos Ray Norris, the martial arts legend, the unbreakable Cordell Walker, the last true action hero of classical American cinema, has fallen. He was 86 years old. And yet, what happened exactly 1 week after they lowered his body into the ground in a quiet cemetery on the island of Kauai has left even the most hardened skeptics struggling to explain what they witnessed. Flowers that should not have bloomed, a visitor no one expected, and a handwritten letter buried beneath the soil that connected to a secret Chuck Norris had carried for over 26 years. Before his passing, in his final lucid hours, the strongest man on the planet chose to break his silence about dark rumors, hidden children, and the real reason he abandoned Hollywood at the peak of his power. But first, let us walk through the most complete record of the final chapter of Chuck Norris, beginning with the quiet years that preceded the end. Since 2021, Chuck Norris had largely retreated from public life to his 700-acre ranch in Navasota, Texas. He divided his time between the sprawling Texas property and a private residence on the island of Kauai, Hawaii, where the tropical climate eased the strain on his aging body. His days revolved around family, faith, and the organization that had become his greatest pride. The Kickstart Kids Foundation, which he established decades earlier, continued to provide martial arts training to thousands of middle school students across Texas. The program was designed not merely to teach combat, but to instill discipline, self-respect, and resistance to drug abuse in vulnerable youth. Reports from local media outlets in Navasota confirmed that Norris maintained a strict personal training regimen well into his 80s. He was frequently seen walking the perimeter of his ranch at dawn, performing modified kata sequences in his private dojo, and supervising young instructors who traveled from across the country to train under his guidance. His Chungkukdo martial arts system, the hybrid discipline he had spent decades refining, continued to expand under his remote oversight. This period of his life was defined by a singular mission. He was determined to codify his martial arts philosophies into a permanent system that would outlast his physical presence on this earth. He did not know how soon that mission would become urgent. Entering the month of March 2026, public attention briefly turned toward the celebration of the legend's 86th birthday. On March 10, 2026, Chuck Norris posted what would become his final public video on his official social media accounts. The short clip showed him standing in his home gym in Kauai, delivering crisp punching combinations against a heavy bag with a precision that defied his age. His eyes were sharp, his stance was rooted. He addressed the camera directly, confronting the swirling rumors about his declining health with the kind of blunt confidence only he could deliver. The action star shared his final public words about growing older. "I am not getting older. I am just leveling up. And today is a new stage in the journey that I have fully embraced." The video was shared hundreds of thousands of times within hours. Fans flooded the comments with tributes and Chuck Norris facts. The immortal legend seemed once again untouchable. The situation changed abruptly 8 days later. In the early hours of March 18, 2026, emergency response teams were dispatched to the Norris residence in Kauai following a call reporting a severe medical episode. TMZ was the first outlet to break the story, publishing a brief alert that sent shockwaves through every corner of the internet. Chuck Norris had been rushed to a local medical facility in a condition described as requiring immediate and specialized intervention. Within the hour, major news agencies, including the Associated Press and Reuters, began issuing continuous updates. Fans gathered outside the hospital entrance. Martial arts forums that had been quiet for years suddenly erupted with thousands of new posts. Close sources confirmed to multiple outlets that his condition was extremely critical. and that the family had requested absolute privacy. Hope lasted less than 24 hours. On the morning of March 19, 2026, a representative of the Norris family released an official statement to the press. The statement confirmed that Chuck Norris had passed away peacefully in the presence of his wife Gina and his children. The cause of death was attributed to natural causes. He was 86 years old. The man who the internet had crowned as invincible was gone. With his passing, the mythology that had surrounded his name for 2 decades was finally and permanently shattered. Throughout his life, Chuck Norris had consistently maintained one philosophical position above all others. True strength does not lie in muscles, but in the perseverance to protect the ones you love. The passing of Chuck Norris marked the definitive end of an era of heroic action cinema, built on the foundation of real martial arts combat. The legend had been made of flesh and blood after all. But the story does not end at his final breath. His death in Hawaii in 2026 revealed truths about the man that the public had never fully understood. It reopened the darkest chapter of his sudden disappearance from Hollywood. It forced the world to confront why the strongest man on the planet had willingly walked away from fame to fight a life and death battle to save his wife. And it surfaced the painful secret of a child he had hidden from the world for 26 years. All of these revelations would converge in the most extraordinary way at his gravesite 7 days after his funeral. The private burial ceremony for Chuck Norris took place on March 22, 2026, at a small cemetery on the northern coast of Kauai. The family had chosen this location because it overlooked the Pacific Ocean, a view that Norris had once described as the only place where he felt truly at peace. Approximately 200 guests attended the service, including former military personnel, martial arts grandmasters, and a small number of close friends from his years in Hollywood. The ceremony was closed to the public and to the press. Armed private security ensured that no cameras breached the perimeter. A simple granite headstone was placed at the site, engraved with his birth name, Carlos Ray Norris, and a single line he had requested years earlier in his estate planning documents. The fight is never over. For the first 6 days following the burial, the gravesite remained quiet. Local groundskeepers reported that small groups of fans occasionally left flowers, American flags, and handwritten letters at the base of the headstone. Nothing unusual, nothing out of the ordinary. Then came the morning of March 29th. The groundskeeper named Thomas O'Connor arrived at the cemetery at approximately 6:15 a.m. to begin his routine maintenance. What he encountered at the Norris gravesite stopped him in his tracks. The area immediately surrounding the headstone was covered in plumeria blossoms, not scattered petals, fully intact, freshly bloomed plumeria flowers in a dense, circular arrangement that extended roughly 4 feet in every direction from the base of the stone. The detail that made Thomas call his supervisor was not the flowers themselves, but the fact that there were no plumeria trees within 300 yards of that section of the cemetery. Furthermore, March is not the natural blooming season for plumeria in Kauai. The flowers typically reach peak bloom between June and October. Horticulturists later consulted by local news station KGMB confirmed that a spontaneous bloom of this magnitude and density in late March was, in their professional assessment, extraordinarily unlikely under natural conditions. But the flowers were only the beginning of what was discovered that morning. Resting at the center of the floral arrangement, directly against the headstone, was a sealed envelope. It was weathered but intact, constructed from a type of heavy linen paper that had not been commercially available since the early 1990s. "What do you think? Let's get away," Carrie asked. The envelope bore no postmark and no return address. Written on the front in careful handwriting were 3 words: "For my father." Thomas O'Connor immediately contacted the Norris family's estate representatives. Within 2 hours, Gina Norris and her stepson Mike Norris arrived at the cemetery, accompanied by a private security detail. When Gina opened the envelope, she found a 4-page handwritten letter. The contents of that letter have never been made public. What was confirmed through a family spokesperson later that afternoon was that the letter had been written by Dina Norris, Chuck's long-hidden daughter from a relationship in the 1960s. The spokesperson stated only that the letter contained deeply personal reflections on forgiveness, fatherhood, and a promise that Dina had made to Chuck in private during his final days. According to the spokesperson, Dina Norris was moved to tears upon reading the letter and immediately contacted Dina by phone. But a third element of what occurred that morning elevated the event from emotional to genuinely inexplicable. Multiple witnesses, including Thomas Akana and 2 early morning visitors to adjacent grave sites, independently reported seeing a red-tailed hawk perched on top of the headstone when they first approached the area. The bird remained motionless for several minutes, seemingly undisturbed by human presence, before lifting off and circling the gravesite 3 times and disappearing toward the ocean. In Hawaiian spiritual tradition, the appearance of a hawk, particularly the Io, is considered a powerful ancestral sign. It is believed to represent a departed warrior spirit, communicating protection and peace to those left behind. Thomas Akana, who is of native Hawaiian descent, later told KGMI News that in 30 years of working in cemeteries across the island, he had never witnessed anything like the combination of events that morning. "I have seen people grieve in beautiful ways. I have seen families leave incredible tributes, but I have never seen the land itself respond to a man's passing like that. I cannot explain the flowers. I cannot explain that bird. I can only tell you what I saw." Local media coverage of the event spread rapidly through social media. Within 48 hours, the story was picked up by national outlets including NBC News and the Associated Press. Opinions were sharply divided. Skeptics pointed to the possibility that a devoted fan had planted the flowers overnight, and that red-tailed hawks are native to the Hawaiian Islands and require no supernatural explanation. Supporters of a more mystical interpretation noted the precise timing, the impossible bloom, the deeply personal letter, and the cultural significance of the hawk's behavior. The Norris family declined further public comment beyond a brief written statement released on March 31st. The statement read, in part, "Our family is grateful for the outpouring of love." What happened at the gravesite was a private and deeply meaningful experience. We believe Chuck's spirit continues to watch over those he loved. Whether coincidence or something beyond human understanding, the events of March 29th became permanently woven into the legend of Chuck Norris. The miracle, as the public came to call it, did not exist in isolation. It was the final chapter of a story built on secrets, sacrifice, and the painful truths that only death can fully unlock. To understand the weight of that letter found at the grave, one must travel back to the 1960s and confront the darkest chapter of the legend's private life. In 1962, during his military service in California, while living with his first wife Diane Holacek, Chuck Norris engaged in an extramarital relationship. This brief encounter with a woman named Johanna produced consequences that would echo across decades. The result of this affair was the birth of a daughter named Dina. Chuck Norris was completely unaware of her existence for 26 years. The child grew up without knowing the identity of her biological father. It was not until 1991 that Dina, now an adult, took the initiative to write a letter to Chuck Norris, seeking confirmation of what she had long suspected. Rather than retreating behind lawyers or demanding a DNA test, Norris chose to meet her in person immediately. In his autobiography, Against All Odds, Norris described the moment he first saw Dina as the instant he knew with absolute certainty that she was his daughter. He did not need science to tell him what his heart already recognized. He openly admitted in the memoir that he had betrayed his wife and that the affair was one of the greatest mistakes of his life. This confession became a permanent scar on the image of a devoted family man that he had carefully constructed over decades. His relationship with Dina was gradually reconciled over the following years, and she eventually became a recognized and welcome member of the Norris family. The letter found at his grave in March 2026, written in her own hand, was the final act of a reconciliation that had taken more than 3 decades to complete. But the turmoil in his personal life did not end with the revelation of his hidden daughter. The greatest tragedy of Chuck Norris's life struck in 2013, and it involved the woman who had become the center of his universe. Gina O'Kelly, whom he married in 1998, underwent a series of routine MRI scans to examine a persistent case of rheumatoid arthritis. During these procedures, her body was injected multiple times with a contrast agent containing gadolinium, a heavy metal compound used to enhance medical imaging. What was supposed to be a standard diagnostic process became a catastrophe. Severe side effects from gadolinium poisoning caused Gina's health to collapse rapidly and violently. She experienced intense burning pain throughout her body, debilitating physical weakness, and serious neurological complications that left her unable to perform basic daily functions. Chuck Norris's sudden and complete disappearance from Hollywood at that time generated a storm of false rumors. Some speculated he had become a recluse. Others whispered about secret illnesses or personal breakdowns. The truth was far simpler and far more devastating. He chose to abandon every film project, every business venture, every public appearance to devote himself entirely to the fight to keep his wife alive. The actor later confirmed that he spent more than $2 million on advanced and experimental medical treatments in a desperate effort to reverse the damage to Gina's body. He remained at her bedside 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, at a specialized treatment center in Texas, personally monitoring every breath she took, every medication she received. Speaking about his decision to walk away from one of the most successful careers in action cinema history, Chuck Norris made his priority unmistakably clear. "I gave up my film career to focus on keeping Gina alive. That is the most important thing." This battle extended beyond the hospital room and into the courtroom. In 2017, Chuck and Gina Norris officially filed a lawsuit against 11 pharmaceutical companies involved in the production and distribution of gadolinium-based contrast agents. The lawsuit alleged that these corporations had knowingly failed to adequately warn patients and physicians about the severe risk of heavy metal toxicity. They sought damages totaling $10 million for the physical suffering and emotional devastation they had endured. The case attracted the involvement of leading legal teams and medical experts from around the world. Chuck Norris leveraged his public platform to raise awareness about the dangers of gadolinium, speaking directly to millions through interviews and social media. By 2020, a confidential settlement was reached between the Norris family and the pharmaceutical corporations. The specific terms were never disclosed, but the lawsuit was officially dismissed, bringing the years-long legal battle to a formal close. Although Gina's health never fully returned to its original state, Chuck's unwavering devotion was credited with stabilizing her condition and giving her back a quality of life that doctors had once said was impossible. The couple retreated to their ranch in Navasota, choosing isolation over the noise of fame. He chose love over legacy. He chose his wife over his career. And the world, once it finally learned the truth, understood why. The courage to make that sacrifice did not materialize from nowhere. It was forged in the fires of poverty, abandonment, and relentless hardship in the plains of Oklahoma. Before he was a husband willing to sacrifice everything, Carlos Ray Norris was a shy and fragile boy who was beaten down by the world long before he learned to fight back. On March 10, 1940, in the small town of Ryan in the state of Oklahoma, Carlos Ray Norris entered the world under the harshest of circumstances. His family lived in deep poverty, classified among the rural working-class poor who struggled each day to secure the most basic necessities of survival. His father, Ray Norris, possessed genuine skill as a mechanic, but was consumed by severe alcoholism that destroyed any chance of financial stability. His mother, Wilma, was a woman of extraordinary resilience who shouldered the full burden of raising 3 young sons essentially on her own. The family relocated frequently in pursuit of better opportunities, eventually settling in North Torrance, California, where a new chapter of hardship awaited. Carlos Ray Norris's experience in the public school system was the opposite of the heroic narrative the world would later construct around him. Throughout his years at North Torrance High School, Carlos was a frequent target of bullying. His thin physique and deeply introverted personality made him an easy mark among classmates, who were physically stronger and socially dominant. He had no athletic achievements, no social standing, no indication whatsoever that he would become anything other than another forgotten young man from a broken home. In 1958, after graduating from high school with no clear path forward, Carlos made the decision that would alter the trajectory of his entire existence. He enlisted in the United States Air Force. He was assigned to train as a military policeman, a role that demanded the kind of physical authority and mental toughness he had never possessed. The most pivotal moment in his transformation came when he was stationed at Osan Air Base in South Korea later that year. In this foreign land, thousands of miles from the streets where he had been pushed around and humiliated, Carlos confronted a terrifying truth about himself. During a routine patrol assignment, he realized with absolute clarity that he was too physically weak and too unskilled to control even the most basic confrontational situation. The shame of that helplessness drove him to seek out a Tang Sudo dojo in the surrounding area. Under the strict and unforgiving guidance of Korean martial arts masters, Carlos subjected himself to a grueling training regimen that consumed many hours of each day. He trained through brutal weather. He trained through injuries that would have stopped most men. He trained with a desperation that could only come from someone who had spent his entire life feeling powerless. It was during this period of military service that his fellow servicemen began calling him by a new name, Chuck. The nickname became inseparable from the transformation that was taking place. The timid boy was dying. A disciplined and dangerous warrior was being born. In 1961, after years of relentless effort, Chuck Norris officially earned his first black belt in Tang Soo Do. This achievement represented far more than a ranking in martial arts. It was the complete destruction and rebuilding of a human being. He expanded his training into judo and other disciplines while still fulfilling his military duties with distinction. When he completed his service and returned to the United States in 1962, the person who stepped off the plane bore no resemblance to the boy who had left. He carried a black belt, an iron will, and the unshakable identity of a true martial artist. The journey of a warrior is not measured by the belts he earns, but by the depth of the weakness he overcomes. Chuck Norris proved that the most devastating origins cannot imprison the spirit of a man determined to rise. The Pact with the Little Dragon. The period from 1964 to 1968 established Chuck Norris as the most dominant competitive martial artist in America. He entered tournament after tournament, dismantling opponents with the spinning kick technique that became his feared signature. State championships fell, regional titles accumulated. His reputation as an unstoppable force spread through every dojo and competition circuit in the country. The summit of his competitive journey arrived in 1968 when he captured the World Professional Middleweight Karate Championship. Norris defended that title successfully for 6 consecutive years before retiring from competition in 1974 with an almost unblemished record. Elite contemporaries including Joe Louis and Louis Delgado each suffered defeat at his hands. In press interviews, they openly acknowledged that Norris possessed a terrifying striking power combined with an almost inhuman ability to absorb punishment. In 1967, at the National Karate Championship held in Long Beach, California, a meeting occurred that would reshape the future of martial arts cinema. Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee were introduced for the first time. The two men recognized in each other a kindred intensity and a shared obsession with pushing combat arts beyond their traditional boundaries. They quickly established a close professional relationship that evolved into genuine friendship. Training sessions in the backyard of Bruce Lee's Los Angeles home became a regular occurrence. They spent hours exchanging techniques, testing theories, and debating the philosophy of real combat. Norris confirmed in multiple interviews that this period of mutual exchange sharpened both men's abilities in ways that formal training alone could never have achieved. In 1972, Bruce Lee was developing the film Way of the Dragon and extended an invitation to Norris to play a pivotal antagonist role. Their climactic fight scene, staged inside the Roman Colosseum, would go on to become one of the most iconic sequences in the history of martial arts filmmaking. During preparation for the role, Norris revealed a fascinating behind-the-scenes detail. Bruce Lee demanded that Norris gain nearly 10 kilograms of body weight to create a dramatic physical contrast on screen. Bruce Lee asked me to gain weight so I would look like a monster facing him. Norris later recalled about their private agreement. He accepted the condition without hesitation. It remains the only time in his entire career that Chuck Norris agreed to portray a character who loses a fight. The global success of Way of the Dragon opened the gates of Hollywood to the world karate champion. His acting career erupted when he partnered with Cannon Films in the early 1980s. In 1984, Missing in Action became a box office sensation, casting Norris as Colonel James Braddock, a Vietnam War hero fighting to rescue prisoners of war. The character embodied resilience and justice enforced through raw physical power. In 1986, Delta Force amplified his global stardom further, placing him in the role of an elite counterterrorism operative, battling international threats. The film performed strongly worldwide and cemented Chuck Norris as an American action hero recognized on every continent. Despite his commercial dominance, film critics consistently targeted what they perceived as limitations in his acting range. Reviews frequently described his on-screen presence as rigid and emotionally flat. Chuck Norris addressed these criticisms not with defensiveness, but with strategic precision. He made no attempt to reinvent himself as a dramatic performer. Instead, he doubled down on what separated him from every other action star in the industry. His fight sequences were real. His techniques were authentic. His physicality was undeniable. He stated plainly in one interview that his actions would always speak louder than any line of dialogue ever could. This approach secured him a fiercely loyal audience and ensured the profitability of every project he touched throughout the decade. The 1980s ended with Chuck Norris standing at the pinnacle of the action genre, possessing both the wealth and the cultural influence that came with sustained blockbuster success. But a new frontier was waiting for him. Television would redefine his fame in ways that even Hollywood could not have predicted. The birth of an internet deity. In the early 1990s, Chuck Norris executed a strategic pivot from theatrical films to the expanding landscape of network television. In 1993, Walker, Texas Ranger premiered on CBS and immediately dominated its time slot. The series ran for 8 seasons, generating extraordinary ratings and producing enormous revenue for its production and distribution partners. But beneath the surface of that success, a financial conflict was quietly building. In 2018, Chuck Norris stunned the entertainment industry by filing a $30 million lawsuit against CBS and Sony Pictures Television. The suit alleged that these corporations had systematically concealed the true revenue generated by the series through international broadcast distribution and syndication deals. Norris's legal team argued that he had been deliberately deprived of his contractual share of profits over a period spanning more than a decade. The case, which ground through the courts for years, pulled back the curtain on deeply entrenched practices of financial manipulation within the entertainment industry. Although the series concluded its original run in 2001, the cultural footprint of Chuck Norris was about to undergo a transformation that no one, least of all Norris himself, could have anticipated. In 2005, on the internet forum Something Awful, users began posting absurdist fictional statements about Chuck Norris's supposed superhuman abilities. Chuck Norris can burn ants with a magnifying glass at night. Chuck Norris counted to infinity twice. These satirical declarations, which became known globally as Chuck Norris facts, spread with viral speed across every major platform on the internet. The phenomenon unintentionally elevated a middle-aged action star into a figure of mythological, almost divine proportions in popular culture. Initially, Chuck Norris was genuinely confused and somewhat offended by the trend. He worried publicly that the absurd exaggerations might undermine the authentic martial arts values he had spent a lifetime cultivating. In a memorable appearance with Conan O'Brien, Norris admitted that he struggled to understand why millions of people were fabricating impossible stories about him. But as the phenomenon proved overwhelmingly positive in its reception, Norris made a characteristically pragmatic decision. He embraced it completely. He channeled the attention toward promoting his Kickstart Kids organization and other charitable causes. I accepted those facts as part of the fun of popular culture, Norris later explained with a rare smile. Parallel to his internet mythology, the real Chuck Norris continued to earn recognition at the highest levels of the global martial arts establishment. His Chunkuk-do system matured into a comprehensive martial arts discipline practiced by thousands of students worldwide. From 1990 to 2012, the name Chuck Norris transcended entertainment entirely. He became a permanent fixture in the cultural heritage of the modern world. He was not merely an actor who played fighters. He was a fighter who happened to act. And that distinction made all the difference. The journey from a terrified boy in Oklahoma to a global icon of strength officially reached its conclusion on a quiet morning in Hawaii. His passing in March 2026 did not simply mark the loss of a celebrity. It marked the end of an entire era of action cinema, built on the reality of combat rather than the illusion of it. The final revelations about his hidden daughter, his sacrifice for his wife, and the extraordinary events at his gravesite assembled the complete portrait of the man behind the myth. Chuck Norris was not immortal. He was something far more remarkable. He was a deeply flawed, profoundly courageous human being who spent his life proving that true power is not measured in roundhouse kicks. It is measured in the willingness to sacrifice everything for the people you love. The miracle at his grave, whether divine intervention or beautiful coincidence, became the final punctuation mark on a life that refused to be ordinary. The flowers that should not have bloomed did bloom. The letter that needed to be delivered was delivered. And the hawk that circled his resting place flew toward the ocean, toward the horizon, toward whatever waits beyond. The fight, as his headstone reads, is never over. If you were someone who grew up watching Walker, Texas Ranger, who quoted Chuck Norris facts with your friends, or who simply admires the warrior spirit of a man who chose family over fame, leave a tribute in the comments to honor his legacy alongside us. Do not forget to subscribe and activate notifications so you never miss our in-depth documentary features about the world's greatest legends. Thank you for watching. Farewell, and we will see you again in the journeys ahead.